Part 2 of the BuzzBubble interview with Barry Wacksman.
It's unfortunate the word media ever got attached to the word social because the word media in the business is tarnished. Because media is about the stuff that you buy, right?
Well, let's talk about that. Yeah, I'd love to get your perspective on media and the stuff you buy as opposed to some people strictly think of media as reach. And
Sure. We don't even call it media here. I think we're going to redefine and call it connections or something like that. Okay. It's more about how to connect. But the model of RGA is really rooted in, I think, two different things that we see as the big opportunities in the digital age. And I think first and foremost, we're centered on what we call platforms. And so a platform is something that we can build for a client. It tends to be an ecosystem. It's not one thing. It tends to be a bunch of stuff that's connected. But a platform is something that people can integrate into their life. So we're not really rooted in the idea of communicating with people and pushing messages out to them and being in the business of communications per se. We do a lot of communications, but the starting point for a lot of what we do is to think about these platforms that we can build for our clients that people integrate into their lives. That to us is the big opportunity in the digital age. We've seen again and again how new platforms enter into the marketplace. They go from being like a little fringe thing that no one ever heard of, and then overnight they're just mass adopted. Yeah. And that could be, we could point to things like Facebook. You go back to Google. Google came along, and at one time it had no market share, and then almost overnight it became the dominant search product, and et cetera, and they've added all these other things. So there's a little bit of Google in what we do, rooted in utility, building things that people can use again and again, rather than the idea of a campaign, which is something that it gets pushed out to people. And even when traditional agencies approach digital, they still think in the mindset of campaign. Right. They end up creating viral videos, they create little gags and stunts that people go and they have a laugh at once or twice. Maybe if it's really good, they pass it along, which creates that sort of currency. But that's the end of it. Right. A platform is something more like Facebook or Flickr or things I mentioned with Google. It's something that you can use again and again, and you integrate it in your life, and your use of it somehow changes your life in some interesting or meaningful way. And so rather than thinking about digital as a place to just deliver campaigns the same way we've been doing it again and again, we view the main opportunity for our clients is that they can create these platforms. And so then the media equation completely shifts, because as people adopt these things, we're not talking about paid media any longer. We're talking about something that the client owns. So it's an instance of owned media. And if these things are really good, they have all of the characteristics that media used to deliver in the past. They have reach, because people use it. They have frequency, because they're using it again and again. It's not just one-off viral video kind of scenario. So it becomes an instance of what we call owned media. And often we can build these things in a way where they can be scraped apart, pulled apart, shared, across all of the other frameworks that exist in the digital context, and they become instances of what we call earned media, where the consumers are taking the things that they're doing inside of these owned media environments and they're sharing them. And then what's the role of paid media? I think paid media can be valuable to create awareness and kind of light the spark that if these things are built really well, they don't need a whole lot of paid media to get them going, but eventually they kind of take off and have a life of their own. I mean, we've built things that have millions of users now, things like Nike Plus, which I think is the paradigm of what one of these platforms looks like. And that thing keeps evolving and changing. Over time, the audience continues to grow. So it's an instance of owned media that Nike has, where millions of runners are coming to this thing every month. I think the average Nike Plus runner visits it 3 times a week. Wow. So that's like a TV show, right?
Yeah.
Better than a TV show. Like once a week, right? So it has all of the characteristics of media, but we're not trying to message inside of Nike Plus. I mean, there is content in there about new running shoes and things of that nature. But as people adopt these things into their lives, it completely transforms the relationship that consumer has with that brand. It's not just a place where they go and have messages delivered to them. It's a place where it actually changes their life. And I think most people who become Nike Plus runners will talk about how profound of an influence it is, both in terms of their motivation, the fact that they're now part of a running community, the fact that it connects them to all these great events that they can participate in. So it is life-changing for a runner. Is it the only thing out there for runners? No, of course not. But I think it was the defining technology that kind of opened the window to how this stuff could work.
It was something that hadn't been done.
It hadn't been done before.
Using technology to create that reach, create that community, And I think I was on there today, 154 million
Yeah,
miles
right.
and ticking.
Exactly.
Fantastic site.
The power of these things is that they can move the business needle. I think Nike's market share in running shoes has gone up dramatically since the launch of Nike Plus, and they were in a situation prior where they were losing market share. And they had competitors that had aggressively really challenged their dominance in running. Companies like Asics and New Balance that had entered into the scene and had stolen Nike's market share away.
Right.
Not that they were still number one in running shoes, but their market share was declining. And since Nike Plus launched, their market share has gone back up. So that's what we're trying to do, right?
At the end of the day, whatever the method.
Yeah, and I think what we find is that there's a lot of marketing challenges that are almost impervious to this traditional method of pumping out messages and becoming even more and more problematic going forward as consumers continue to gain more and more control of their media lives.
Right.
That whole opportunity of pumping out messages is dwindling. And I think you find yourself in categories like Nike was in where I don't think an ad could have solved their business challenges. They needed to innovate.
The life integration that you talk about could have never happened, in my opinion, and without something like this, without building the community, without creating something new.
And I think what we do is we look around the digital ecosystem and we see things like Facebook, which 3 years ago, no one had ever heard of it except for college kids.
Right.
And then now it's 200 plus million users. So the adoption curves of these things are exponential. And we see that when people build things that create a meaningful connection in your life, that people are willing to adopt this technologies, not just on like a small scale, but these are now the titans of media. These are the things that have an audience that's the envy of anything out there today. The monetization of these things is obviously an issue for some of them, not for Google, but it is for others. But I think as the industry looks at these things, they don't look at them as opportunities of how can we build something like that for our brand, but wow, let's run an ad on there. They just want to look at it as another place for paid media opportunities, or even if it's free media type thing, it's more of a place to do the same old rather than thinking about how to revolutionarily create something new.
That's a great analogy for the traditional folks that are chasing it, trying to adapt, looking at this new media and saying, "Oh, great place to buy media," and not create this life integration. Right. Taking their old model and trying to work it into the new digital age.
And so this goes full circle back to what does it mean to be a digital agency. If you can't build stuff like this, then I don't think you can be a digital agency. And maybe in the future you won't be able to be an agency. And I think one of the biggest challenges that the business has is that the business model of agencies is rooted in these teams of people that I just mentioned, the planners, the account people, the types of creatives. They never made the investment to build technology as a discipline inside of ad agencies. I think when there was something that looked foreign to them, they always figured I could just go buy that on the outside. It's sort of the production outsourcing mentality. And even today it continues that way. I think there's some agencies that do some pretty great digital work, like Goodby, but their business model is more about outsourcing the development of their ideas. And I think that model can work great, again, in that sort of campaign-centric way, where your traditional sort of conceptual teams can come up with an idea for a campaign, but it's never going to lead to the build of platforms. There's never going to be the right people sitting at the table to ever come up with those ideas. That sort of outsourced model for agencies is not going to work as we sort of roll forward the clock, and we want to make our work more digital. There's like a little stopgap measure right now where a traditional agency can get a few creative people who think very broadly, come up with some interesting ideas, and then there's this whole network of production companies that have cropped up, just like they did in the TV era. Companies like Barbarian and North Kingdom that do amazing work, really incredible. But they're probably brought in pretty late. They're treated like production vendors rather than being partners at the table to actually help conceive of the ideas that are then sold to the clients. So without the integration of some of these types of disciplines on the client team, you're never going to get to these sort of higher level platform ideas.
That was the idea that evolved, what you said, that really stuck with me, that if you don't have maybe the database programmer on your client team, how would you ever come up with that idea? Or that concept that, the copywriter doesn't know that you can store this and segment the data and you can reach these certain people, and it'll just never come about.
That's it for part 2 of the BuzzBubble with Barry Wacksman. Tune in next week for part 3.